Welcome to Movie Train. Today I bring you the explanation of Passenger, a 2016 sci-fi romance drama film. At the beginning of the film, we are shown the interstellar spaceship Avalon traveling through space on its way to a colonized world called Homestead, with all its corridors empty, the ship on autopilot. Along with 258 crew members, 5,000 passengers are in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship passes through an asteroid belt that is weakening its shield. Power is diverted to the main shield, but the ship is on a collision course with a giant asteroid. Suddenly, the asteroid collides with a ship due to various malfunctions. The ship itself begins repairs, but one of the hibernation pods is activated. Then we come to know that that person is a mechanical engineer. His name is Preston. Her vessel opens and an automated system helps her awaken, telling her that she has spent 120 years in hibernation and that the ship is only 4 months away from her destination, and she is told to enjoy these 4 months. And enjoy the spectacular view of the space. Jim receives instructions about his ID band, his cabin, and elementary activities before he arrives on the planet. He is escorted to his chamber and he leaves the van ready to meet other people on the ship and make new friends, but he is too excited and nervous before meeting the different people. He gets ready, leaves his cabin, and moves into an automated class man for the entire learning group. Jim looks a bit concerned as the hologram explains the situation on Earth, calling it overpopulated and overvalued. This asks him to put his questions to the end of the lesson. But Jim keeps asking why he is alone there. He learns that the hologram cannot answer him and goes in search of other people. He reaches the main meeting of the ship. There was no one there either. After that, Jim gets very nervous. There, an automated information desk offers help to Jim. Jim tells him to talk to a real person. The machine sends him to talk to a man named Stewart. He went to meet Seward, but there was no one there. He again went to that automated information desk and told him that I wanted to meet the captain. Then the machine sent him to the crew chamber. When he reached near the crew's chamber, he came to know that he was not allowed to go inside, but he could see them from outside. Then he came to know that the crew had not woken up yet. Jim eventually heads to the observatory, where he knows that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead when he knows that he has woken up too soon. So he goes back to the meeting hall and sends a message to Earth telling him what to do because he doesn't know how to go back into hibernation. The communication system informs him that it will take about 55 years for the high-cost call to Earth to be answered. Jim gets very upset on hearing this. He was walking around the ship when he sees a person in the ship's bar. Jim goes there to talk to him, and he learns that he is a bartender. When Jim talks to him, he feels something strange. Jim learns that his name is Arthur. Arthur offers Jim a drink. But when Arthur goes to get a drink for Jim, Jim sees his feet and Jim learns that he is an android. Jim wants to get more information from him, but he can't even explain to Android how he can be there ahead of time. Jim wakes up in his cabin the next day and goes to the canteen to have lunch, where he learns that most of the menu items are reserved for gold-class passengers only. He takes his plain coffee and tries to figure out how to fix his hibernation room. After he finds all the equipment in the ship, he manages to operate it by laying it inside the pod, but nothing happens. Next, he decides to use the equipment he found to get to the crew's hibernation chambers. That doesn't work either. Then we come to know that due to the collision of the asteroid, there is a minor fault around the ship. Jim keeps returning to the bar to drink, but mostly to talk to Arthur. The android gives him some advice that convinces him to sneak into one of the sleeping classrooms and try to have some fun on the ship. Jim tries all the restaurants, sports entertainment systems, but as time goes by, he becomes even more unhappy being there alone. One day he gets intoxicated and wanders around in hibernation pods when he stumbles into an airlock with a spacesuit designed for spacewalks. Jim gets into a suit and gets into the airlock and pushes a lever and then a button to release the airlock door. Once outside the ship, he is mesmerized by the scene. He is the only conscious human being who is experiencing that time. Jim releases the magnet on his shoes and floats into space. Feeling devastated, He comes back in, takes off the suit but goes back without the airlock. He pulls the lever ready to end it all, but changes his mind at the last minute and goes back inside and slips on a bottle. Jim immediately stands up, then his eyes fall on a pod nearby, in which there was a very beautiful girl. He sees the pod in which Aurora was written. It means the girl who was in that pod. Her name was Aurora. Jim starts liking her as soon as she sees him. He searches her files in the directory and listens to her passenger interview, becoming enamored with her later scene sitting next to her pod, still listening to her interviews. Back to the bar. He is reading some of her work and is talking to Arthur about his writings. He becomes obsessed with the irony of his situation, wanting to move to another planet for a better life. Waking up early and not reaching there and searching for your ideal woman so that she can be out of his reach. Jim keeps thinking about her and wakes up to the idea that he talks with the android on this, but he doesn't understand the riddle. If he wakes her up for his benefit, he must have been trapping her there with him to die on the ship. Jim decides against it at first, but with time he cannot let it go. Until one day he changes his mind. He approaches her pod and manages to activate it. He manages to wake up Aurora. Now we see that Aurora is also going through the same process as it did with Jim. He hides seeing Aurora awake and goes back to his room. After a while, he heads into the main hall hoping to find her. And there he sees Aurora as confused as he was a year ago. Jim tells her that only they are awake and takes her to the observatory. He then tells her that he can reach neither the crew nor the ship's main commands. Aurora is terrified and wants to get back in her pod. Jim follows her and tells her that there is no special equipment on the ship that can help her get back into hibernation, and tells him that we are stuck here. They go back to the Grand Hall and Jim tells her that she should rest because she has just come out of hibernation. Aurora asks Jim how long have been here, then Jim tells her that I have been stuck here for a year. He asks Arthur not to tell Aurora that he was the one who woke her up. The next day Aurora heads to the Grand Hall and asks the automated information desk about the hibernation pots. Jim was also with him. When he does not get any solution from there, then both of them go to the dining hall to have breakfast. As soon as they leave, we see that there is a defect in the automatic information desk. While having breakfast, Aurora came to know that Jim has been eating the same type of food for a year. That's why she gives him a gold-class breakfast. They talk about the possibility of fixing the pods, but Jim tells Aurora that hibernation pods can't be fixed, but Aurora isn't ready to accept it. So she searches through the infirmary and then research documents, cruises through, eventually trying to open the doors to Cruz's hibernation quarters. Jim notices there is more malfunction throughout the ship. Aurora told Jim a lot about her life and the reason to came Avalon. When Aurora goes to sleep at night, she thinks that she will start writing her book in space. She goes to the swimming pool to take a bath. After that she meets Jim in the dining hall and takes his interview. She asks why did he go to the colony. Jim responds with company slogans but then goes on to explain that he hopes that in the new world he can be someone he can make a living out of. Later, Aurora tells Jim her story as to why she decided to go to another planet. She reveals that she has return tickets. She wants to become the first writer on Earth who has written her story in space, and when she returns to Earth after 250 years, she will have reached the future. Aurora slowly gives up looking for a way to fix her current situation and Jim finds a way to make her happy. He takes her to the cinema and to the basketball court where they both have fun. Finally, he takes her to the bar to meet Arthur. They rest there for a while. After that Jim goes to modify a robot, then Aurora is at the observatory. We see that Aurora and Jim go on a date. They dine and there Aurora shares stories about her life. She tells him that her father died when she was a teenager. Jim then takes Aurora to the airlock chamber, where he takes Aurora out to the spacewalk. Jim tells him to trust himself. Jim finally has someone to share that great experience with. Jim releases the magnets on his shoes and they float together in space. They come back inside and immediately Aurora kisses Jim, after which we see both of them getting intimate in their room. Soon after that, they start living as a couple. Aurora goes to her cabin and writes about her life in space. They walk together, eat together, sleep together. Jim further explores the ship and finds hydroponics bay. He brings rural flowers to Aurora and she is very happy to see the flowers. One day, Aurora and Jim are mesmerized when the ship passes close to a red giant star. The second day was Aurora's birthday. Jim and Aurora celebrate the birthday. After that, they both go to Arthur's bar. Jim goes to the washroom and prepares a ring made for Aurora, who will confess his love to her today, while Aurora continues to talk with Arthur at the bar. He tells her that it was Jim who woke her up from her hibernation. Hearing this, Aurora gets terrified. Suddenly, Jim comes back and Aurora looks at him and asks if this is true. Jim replies yes to her. She runs away in anger and panic. Jim returns to her cabin and goes to find all her belongings. He goes to Aurora at the cantina the next day, but Aurora leaves from there as he tries to understand her. Aurora is desperate. One night she goes to Jim's cabin, wanting to beat and kill him. Jim tries to apologize and explain his situation to her. He tells her that he has fallen in love with her. But Aurora doesn't mind. She can't forgive him for taking her own life. One night, while Jim is in his cabin, another malfunction occurs. The ship encounters a serious error and the main command is shut down. The other day we see Jim has planted a tree in the Grand Hall to create a better environment. Aurora is rustic and is very happy. After that she goes to have breakfast, but there the machine making breakfast gets spoiled. On the other hand, Jim was going somewhere by the lift, but in the middle the lift gets spoiled. Then he tries from there. It's outside. That's when we hear someone's voice. He was the deck chief. He used to tell who planted the tree on my ship. They both run after hearing the sound and seeing Gus Mancuso standing in front of the Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and tell the chief about the situation. He doesn't understand how 3 pods can fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge and learns that there is something wrong with the ship, but when they check the system information, they do not get any information from there, so they decide to check the ship's fault manually. When they were going to the bridge, a robot was about to fall on their head, but they survived there. Jim tells over there that 15 robots have been spoiled by this. Mancuso goes to check the hybridization pods. There he learns that Jim's pod was damaged by a chip burn, but Aurora's pod was deliberately damaged, on which he questions Jim, on which Jim tells him the simple truth. He then heads to the ship's main communications house, examining the data collected on the bridge when Aurora approaches him. They talk to him about what happened to his pod, but he tells her there's nothing he can do about it. Jim comes in with the 16th broken robot. Suddenly Mancuso feels hibernation sickness, so he goes to rest. But as soon as he passes out, he feels bad and blood comes out of his mouth. That night, Aurora can't sleep, so she goes for a swim in the pool. Suddenly, the whole ship loses gravity and starts sinking because the pool water was moving with her. On the other side, we see Jim and Mancuso is flying. Suddenly the gravity drive resets and they all come down. They both go to each other to find Mancuso. All 3 of them come to the communication device. Mancuso discovers that something happened 2 years ago, by taking out a key system. They need to find and fix what caused the failure and why the ship's equipment is overworking. If they don't fix it, the whole ship will be stuck. They go to the fusion engine to find out the problem, but Mancuso faints. So Jim and Aurora take him to Autodoc. The auto doctor thoroughly checks his body and finds out that he is slowly dying and there is no cure for it. Mancuso gets sad to hear that. After some time, The three of them meet at the observatory, and then Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, who tells him to fix the ship, and he dies there. Suddenly, the ship's siren starts ringing and the ship's equipment machines stop working. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help and they run to the engine.
But another failure occurs in the gravity drive and then suddenly resets. All the robots on the ship do not work properly and Earth does not work properly either. Jim disables it. They finally get to the engine and start looking for the problem. They find it at the power plant, and as they open the hatch, Aurora is sucked in. The asteroid has created a hole in that region. Jim also gets sucked in by the wind, but he grabs the hatch as it closes on it. Eventually, he gets trapped in it, but they quickly manage to seal the breach. Immediately after fixing that problem, Jim learns that there is more than one breach in the hull. The two of them follow the meteor's trajectory and find that it collided with the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can find parts instead. They find the part and replace it, but the process of removing the heat from the reactor still fails. They do it manually, but it fails again. Jim learns that the vent door from the outside of the ship has jammed, so he must now go outside the ship so that they can cool down the reactor. They both go to the airlock, and as he is getting ready to go out, he gives Mancuso's idea to Aurora and says that he may need it as he cannot come back. She helps him with a suit, and as he gets to the airlock, she tells him to come back as she cannot stay on the ship without him. The Aurora moves back to the reactor where the temperature has reached critical limits. A bolt from the reactor went into Aurora's arm as Jim is approaching the vent from outside and sees the door. By then the temperature in the reactor chamber rises. While he tries to bypass the vent door to open it, he soon realizes that he must manually open the door so that the reactor can vent, and he tells Aurora that when he speaks, Aurora will have to pull the liberator out of the reactor's heat. But he doesn't want her to die, and they argue, but he tells her that they have to save the other people and he has to do this work after which Aurora very sadly pulls the lid and manages to get all the heat out of the reactor. But Jim comes out due to the pressure of the heat, and his rope also breaks. While going out fast, there is a hole in his spacesuit, due to which the pressure of the suit starts decreasing. He tells Aurora to forgive me for what I have done and tells me that I have got a hole in my spacesuit and my rope is also broken, due to which I cannot come back. After which Aurora runs to the airlock chamber and walks out wearing her spacesuit. But her tether is very short. She is pulled back but suddenly grabs his strings and manages to pull him in. Aurora brings Jim to Autodoc, where Autodoc declares him dead. She uses the Mancuso bracelet to override medical protocol and revive him. The medical pod automatically works and revives the Jim. Aurora forgives him. Later, Aurora heals Arthur and they then allow Mancuso to bury him at a proper location. Jim takes her to Autodoc and tells her that he has found a way to use the Autodoc pod as a form of hibernation. He tells her to go inside Autodoc and complete her story and make her dream come true by reaching Homestead 2. That's where the scene cuts through and we see Jim in the bar. It is later learned that Aurora refuses to do so and decides to stay with him while he wakes up on the ship. Jim finally proposes to her and they live their lives on the ship. After that, the scene cuts off and we are shown a scene from 88 years later. Avalon reaches its destination. The crew wakes up from hibernation and finds the ship in a very unexpected position. Aurora had left him a message, in which she told about herself and Jim. How he saved everyone's life on the ship, and with this scene the movie ends here. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications, so you can see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.